Hey everybody, welcome to one of today's videos. Today we're talking to Matt LaSala, and he is a financial advisor. He's going to be helping us to understand our finances when it comes to business, what's important, also things that we should potentially plan for, keep track of, and all sorts of good things like that. So, Matt, how are you doing today?
Doing well. Thanks for having me, Bill.
Cool. Tell us a little bit about yourself as a financial advisor, who you are, and let's get to know you a little bit better.
Yeah, so I've been a financial advisor for almost 2 years now. Going back a little bit about my background, I was that I was that person who was always interested in the stock market and investing. I in school I was part of an investment club, doing a lot of the crazy investment strategies like options and derivative trading and things like that. But for me, I always wanted to start my own business, not necessarily investment related, but something that was my own. And just having that passion for the stock market, investing, and then having that deep interest and always looking up the different indicators and watching CNBC, those type of shows. I had that interest, and when COVID happened, everyone took a step back financially. The market took a huge step back, mini recession, but a plummet in only a month. And I had a lot of my peers reaching out to me asking what's going on in the market, what's happening. And I didn't have the best answer. Although I talked about investing a lot, I talked about finance a lot, I was not an expert at the time. I was just as uncertain as everyone else. The pandemic, we were in new waters there. It got me thinking, though, why not become an expert in the field? Why not become a professional in helping people financially? Because I wish I had those answers when people were struggling financially. So that was my trigger to start looking into what it would take to be a professional financial advisor. I quickly found out that it was not a straightforward process where I sign up, I just start practicing being a planner. There's a lot of licenses required. There's security licenses, there's insurance license, and that gets expensive. So I didn't have a financial background in college. It was accounting. I was an accounting major. So very different. Sometimes there's some overlap between accounting and finance, but when in the actual field is very different. Um, so I started looking for companies to represent the company. That's really important to a financial advisor. It needs to have similar philosophy to you. And I landed with a company called Northwestern Mutual. I represent them. The reason why is because they have a similar philosophy to me. They aren't looking at one particular area of someone's plan. They're looking at from a comprehensive, holistic view of someone's entire plan. How do we better somebody, and what's most important to whoever we're working with? So that's how I got to represent Northwestern. They also paid for all my licenses and insurances, so that's great. And I have been there for been a financial advisor for the past 2 years now.
Really cool. All right, so I think that the next thing that we want to get into is really starting to break down, what are the finances that a business would run into?
Yeah.
So for example, balance sheets, P&L, or more of just things they should consider. And
Hmm.
I want to break down a few of those things to just list them off, and then we'll go in detail.
Yeah.
But then also, what are some things that a business should think about when it comes to finances?
Yeah.
So those two things right there, what I want to kind of go into next.
Yeah, that first part is organization from day one. Bill, as you probably know, you want to be very organized
Hmm.
really quickly and have everything set up. Make sure that you are working with professionals. You have your accountant, your advisor, your attorney. That doesn't mean that you necessarily need to hire everyone on day one, but kind of create that structure and that team of professionals around you. Because if you start off really quickly, with missing that step early on, you can probably make by, but when the financial component starts becoming very complicated, just having that organization, that groundwork, the foundation in the beginning all set up would make it very easy to start scaling that business financially. So that's why I say it would be the kind of like that first thing from a financial perspective. Um, and then I guess when you're getting into it a little bit more, have hiring, depending on where you're at, if you have a set of payroll employees, getting a benefit structure set up, a retirement plan, all those type of things, they can become costly. So making sure that that's set up for your business.
All right, so we identified a couple, being one, organization, making sure you have key players.
Yeah.
Then that leads to you being able to scale your business, which is another thing I definitely want to kind of talk about.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about payroll, because benefits and a bunch of other things goes into that.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other areas when it comes to finance that a business really should know that it's coming, or that it is there in the very beginning? Because like you said, some things might not apply in the very
Yeah.
beginning. If it's just you, payroll isn't as big of a hassle as when you have multiple employees.
Mm-hmm.
But especially if you know that
Yeah.
you're building a business where you're going to have multiple employees, or where you're going to be having a storefront with a lot of different items,
Mm-hmm.
having that plan beforehand is important. So the question is, besides those ones we just talked about, are there other areas that would be,
Yeah.
good to know about?
Yeah, well, my everyone has different reasons to start a business, get into business, but my belief is the main goal at the end of the day is to make money, to have a profitable business. And one tool that might sound very basic but is very important from the beginning is having a budget. Knowing where money is going, what you're spending money on, how much money is coming in. Now, it might, if we just do a budget in our head, we're gonna always miss something. So we can have a rough idea of our expenses in our head, but once we put it out on paper, then until we do that, we don't really know for sure. So having a budget early on, um, I believe, is a very important tool for a business.
I agree with you 100%. And it also it tails into a lot of what we do with the coaching is everyone knows what they want to accomplish, especially if it's your business, like your baby. But like, if you're not writing stuff down, like you said, things start flipping through the cracks, and then as you get bigger, it becomes like the crack is just like the Grand Canyon, and now you're like falling apart. So
Yeah.
I like what you're saying with getting this stuff out of the way. Even when you think, oh, I'm just too small to worry about it, like when you start thinking, no, I'm going to be big enough where this is going to be an issue, it helps you with that mental mindset, but it also helps you be prepared and be ready for when those things do come. So
Right, because without a budget, you might get to a point where you feel like money's just flying out the door, and where it's just going. But with a budget, now you're controlling where money's going. You're making a decision that, yes, I'm placing money to invest in XYZ, whatever is important for my business. You have that control, and you're giving each dollar a purpose.
yeah, and it gives you that power over your finances. All right, really cool. So I want to take each one of these and break them down and kind of go more in depth. So we'll just start with the first one. So we were talking about being organized, which I know is going to apply to a lot of the other things, but we were talking about key positions you might need, as well as, what should be organized. We talk about a few of them again, but like let's kind of go into detail about that. So you can pick positions or the things we need to organize first. But I think those are the two pieces of that we should talk about.
Yeah. So, what do you mean by what things do I think should be organized first?
Yeah, so when you're starting the business, what are things that we need to have organized when it comes
Yeah.
to finance? We talked about having a budget, but like what else is involved? What else should we keep track of? How should we build this organization we're talking about?
Yeah. Now this might be a little bit less financial related, but I believe everything ties back to the finances. Is writing down your goals, because if we don't have any goals, whether it be a short term, a 1 year, 3 year, 10 year goal, then what are we trying to accomplish? So I think in terms of organization, that's something you can do before the business is even real. You can start. You can do that at any time. You can update them if you had a business that's been running for 10 years. You can update your next set of goals. So in terms of organization, um, that is what I think is the first start to anything, whether it is a business or no matter where you're at, you can always be updating your goals, and then that gives you a really good framework where to plan for financially.
Okay. So now how do we start applying that now that we know our goals, then when we have our vision of what we need to do?
Yeah.
What do we start putting together after that?
Okay. So yeah, the first thing after you have your vision is you start when building out that budget is organizing what your business is going to need, and you can create the budget that way. Say that every month you go through your fixed expenses. Um, then you go through your variable expenses. So fixed expenses being your rents, your bills, your utilities, things that really aren't changing month to month or slight variation month to month, but are always going to be there. And then your variable expenses that might be a little bit tougher, especially early on. If you've been in business for a while, you could do that much easier. But I would estimate, and I would overestimate everything on the budget when building that out. Then also, when it ties back to what we were mentioning before about aligning a team of professionals, go over those costs. Go over how much it would cost for your attorney, for your CPA. Don't skimp out there. I would make sure you get a good CPA and a good attorney. Those are going to be very key components, and you don't want to run into you don't want to have business problems, business trouble from not having the right team surrounding you. You want to be able to think about and really only focus on the operation side of the business.
Absolutely. No, that's really good. All right, so let's kind of talk a little bit about the positions. We mentioned the CPA. We mentioned, attorneys. What are some other positions that we should probably want to fill when it comes to the finance side of things?
Yeah.
To build that team that we're talking about.
Yeah. So having a financial planner is very important as well. And Bill, are you referring to mostly outside people you want to set up on your team? Or are you talking about starting to hire that hierarchy within the business as well?
Yeah, so I mean that's going to be different depending on the person's business.
Right.
Some people might have a background in one of those areas when it comes to like their taxes. Maybe they can do that themselves, or they might have a bigger budget and be able to hire an
Right.
actual employee because they're tend to be more expensive than a
Mhm.
freelance or subcontractor, if you will. But so it'll kind of go back and forth. But if we were to just say hire, whether it is someone that we put as an employee or a subcontractor, regardless, what are the positions we should be looking to have knowledge of at least?
Yeah. Well, in terms of positions, you want to have a team set up, a board of directors set up. So if you're a new business, if you're starting it for the first time, you want to be able to have trusted people, friends, family, where you can bounce those different ideas off of those for setting up the business. Now, Bill, I don't know what your thoughts on this are. I don't know if that's still important for the businesses that have been operating for 5, 10 years to really be focusing too much on the board of directors for setting for your business. But then for me, that next step would be to really understand the different roles, the different assignments that would need to be done, and listing those out, and going about how are you gonna fill those responsibilities. Doesn't necessarily need to be one person per responsibility. Maybe you as the business owner could achieve or could handle some of those responsibilities on your own, but then figure out what you should be doing, because you're, as the business owner, the most important person in
Hmm.
the business. So you don't want to be doing the work that you deem $15 an hour valuable to on yourself.
Absolutely, and knowing the positions you're going to fill, and then also what you're going to have filled by someone else is important. So definitely good advice. And as far as when it comes to building a board of trustees or just more of people to bounce ideas off of, I think even for that 10-year business, it's always important to have someone to bounce ideas off of or
Right.
grow with, because the longer someone is in that same field or that same area, they're going to become more and more streamlined with what they think about. Whereas if you have someone who's outside or even has a different experience, um, they can bring something completely different to the table
Mm-hmm.
that could work or maybe not work, but it gives you the bouncing, like the springboard to look at other stuff. So um, definitely good advice on how to find those people to fill. So let's talk about scaling.
Okay.
We were talking about whether you're starting or even if you're looking to grow from, say, you've been in business for a couple years, but you just can't seem to expand. When it comes to scaling up, what are some things we need to consider, and what are some things that we need to have, for lack of a better word, prepared to
Mhm.
do any kind of scaling where we're jumping up or getting bigger?
Yeah. So understanding what your cash flow is, going through a cash flow analysis, um, having most of the time for most businesses, having some resources, assets, cash, investments in the ready to go would make that scaling process very easy. But then also, maybe we don't have cash in the bank. Maybe looking into different loan opportunities through banks. So from a financial perspective, we want to lay out all the options, because it's not necessarily if the scale, it's going to be different for every business. But if the scaling is opening up a new store or a new location, it might not necessarily mean we need to pull all the money out in cash. Maybe that's the best opportunity. Maybe there's some other accounts that we set up to be able to, based on what's going on in the market or economy at that time, to scale from a and basically invest into your business in the most efficient manner, whether it is loans, cash, pulling it from some other resources. So that's what I would say is the first step. Where do we access the capital to be able to scale?
Yes, very good. Um, okay, cool. So having the capital to um, do that, expand, and then making sure that we create that plan around what that scaling or getting bigger looks like.
Hmm.
Um, and this way we have that clearer picture. So again, going through the
Hmm.
budget and creating one for it, especially if you are trying to get some sort of funding,
Hmm.
and then also, um, you know, making sure that we've anticipated the many different things that could pop up with that growth. Understanding that you won't make all the capital back, like all the money back right away.
Yeah.
And what is the rate of return you're expecting as far as like profit, and then how much does the loan, or if you're a company and you're using cash, you could even set it up as a loan idea to yourself,
Mhm.
especially when you're doing a company where you're like independent. It's easier to do stuff like that. But if you perceive it as a loan and be like, okay, I borrowed $1 million to do this expansion for my company, and I have to pay it back at this amount,
Mhm.
it helps you get in the habit of making sure that you are thinking in repaying as opposed to just straight out, putting the money there.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Um, all right, so then let's move on to talking a little bit about payroll and paying in general,
Mhm.
because you have W-2 employees, you have 1099 employees. There's insurances involved, and sometimes, and also with workman's comp, things like that. We don't have to get too much into that insurance side of things, but more of just like when it comes to payroll,
Mhm.
what are the ways we can pay people, and how do we kind of anticipate that, set that up, and things like that.
Yeah, I would say for newer solo businesses where it's really like a one person show type of setup, probably the best way is to really 1099 it. I mean, it doesn't make sense to be bringing on payroll that are a full-time person for those businesses, especially if it's something that is really unique that you're doing. Now, if you are one of those businesses that want to constantly be hiring and bringing in new employees, maybe you have a restaurant or something like that, and you're bringing in um, like your chefs, waiters, and you need that full setup, then start looking into some of the different payroll systems that are out there. I wouldn't really do it on your own. There are different third-party payroll systems that you could use for setting up the payroll systems.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that another key thing to understand is that when you're paying an employee through 1099, there's a lot of benefits
Mm-hmm.
where, yes, they're freelance, where they handle their own taxes, and it tends to be cheaper, but it also, does create a little less of that loyalty, consistency,
Mm-hmm.
and a few of those other things. And then when you do W-2, like, you can hold them more accountable. They're easier to manage, but there are additional costs, especially when it comes to adding in benefits and the workman's comp and all sorts of different insurances that you would have to cover, as well as
Mm-hmm.
taxes, and getting all that stuff together. So,
Yeah, Bill.
um,
So a personal example for me is I want to have a full time salary person W-2 just for that reason you mentioned. I want the loyalty. I want them to be working consistently. But right now, I'm still experimenting different roles and different opportunities, and without understanding the role for sure, it's a risk to bring someone on and pay them like a full time employee. So 1099 is almost for me like a temporary position when bringing on someone until I get that structure complete, the responsibilities completely worked out, and then switching them over to a W-2.
absolutely, and that's another good way to look at it. And certain industries work well with the variations in the way that you pay as well. Where, if you're a contractor, it makes sense to hire your people as subcontractors. Or if you're in the video world, especially if you know that they're not going to consistently have work to do,
Hmm.
um, is where that freelance style of stuff really works better. And then if you have office work, or where there's constant sales, or someone who needs to constantly be there, the W-2 makes more sense, and sometimes can end up being a little cheaper, um, because you're able to have that consistency. You can set your rate as opposed to be blindsided by this rate came out of nowhere. All right, so we touched on organizing ourselves when it comes to the finances. We touched on the different team members you should put together. We touched on scaling, and the most important thing being knowing your cash flow. We talked about payrolls and what are the different ways that you can pay people, and how to keep yourself straight there. So the last thing that I want to talk about is um, the different pieces that people should have when it comes to a balance sheet or cash flow sheet or P&L. Like, what are different things that people like? What are some things that people should keep track of
Mm-hmm.
um, in that respect, and what are those things?
So organizational tools, not really accounts. They should have.
Yeah.
Okay. So I mean, you're hitting it on the head right there with the balance sheet, the P&L. I'm a fan of having some type of system to organize that, not just keeping it in an Excel. Excel can work really well temporarily for all that organization. I'm a fan of QuickBooks. QuickBooks is nice. It's inexpensive, and you can easily organize really everything your business is doing. Understand where expenses are going. If you have a business that requires driving, you can actually track your miles in there, and that's a great tax write-off for those businesses out there. Um, but yeah, that's off the top of my mind. Those are the main ones right there. Having understanding your cash flow, your balance sheet, where you your budget, which essentially is almost like an income statement. So that's that's really it for organization. Bill, is there anything that you think I'm missing here?
Well, so I think what I want to do a little bit more is talk
Yeah.
about the things themselves, as if like is
Yeah.
what is a profit and loss sheet, and what
Okay.
does it do? What is a cash flow or a balance sheet, and what does it do?
Yeah. Yeah. So for a cash flow analysis, you want to really understand where. So what it's going to tell you is where cash is really going in the business. So a balance sheet will simply show you how much surplus you have. You put on really it's line items of all of your expenses, and then you have your income, and it subtracts and shows you how much money you have month to month in surplus. Your cash flow analysis is going to show where that surplus is going and how in what it's creating in your business. Are you using that surplus for investing, for financing, for scaling your business, paying off debt, things like that? That's what the cash flow. So these financial statements, they really do talk to each other. Now, this is even though they're called financial statements, this is really more of that accounting question. So I don't know everything about the financial statements. I have a little bit of a background because before being a financial advisor, I was an accountant. But these are things that an accountant will help you get set up on. I think bookkeeping, especially for a new business, is something that everyone can do. It doesn't require a particular skill, and you can go through quick. And when you put things in, when you do your bookkeeping in QuickBooks, it will automatically generate these financial statements, your cash flow, your balance sheet, um, your profit and loss. It will do all that. Um, but yeah, getting into the high level financial statement analysis, I would say that's more in the accountant territory.
Yeah, and we'll be talking to one as well during this all. So that's good.
hmm
All right, so I think that the last thing I want to talk about is what are some, and we kind of touched on a few of them, but what are some actionable steps for people to take, whether they're a new business or just looking to grow, with getting themselves this organization we're talking about, getting themselves ready to do some of these things? Like maybe they've never added payroll before and they're
hmm
thinking about it. Like, what are some things that people need to consider or do to
hmm
kind of get themselves organized or ready for some of these things that we're talking about?
hmm So from the financial advising and financial planning perspective of it, um, like where I specialize in, where um, we want to make sure businesses get set up right from the beginning is one. I keep saying it, but that balance sheet is so important. But then also making sure they have the right account set up. They have their business savings account set up. They have their retirement account set up. They have their insurances set up. That's really that those are starting places. We're not funding them yet. We might not be making money yet, but we have the account set up, and then we also are in position to go out and get loans as we need them from the different bank accounts. So I would say, in terms of actionable steps, making sure that the correct accounts are set up, that everything is in place to as we're getting that surplus, that we're able to distribute it efficiently towards our wealth, our savings, our investments, and then our loans. And then also, if we need to be taking out loans to put ourselves in position to get low interest rates, improve credit score, make sure that we can take out high quality business loans.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree. Okay, that's really good. So having everything set so that we're all together, ready to distribute that. All right. So before we wrap up, any last thoughts or anything about
Hmm.
what we've been talking about?
Yeah, for businesses that are maybe a little bit more established, they are creating they're creating consistent income and want to set up some type of retirement plans. A lot of people have heard of the IRAs, the Roth IRAs, but a special tool that really only business owners get is something called a SEP IRA. And when it comes to overall financial planning and making sure that you're positioning money correctly, you're positioning money correctly for your retirement, I recommend going with a SEP IRA of some type. It allows you to contribute much more than the traditional IRAs that most people get access to. Um, and when I say SEP IRA, what it allows you to do is, a lot of businesses, especially early on, are going to be surprised by how much taxes they have to pay. And when the more money you contribute, really every single dollar you contribute to a SEP IRA, you're deducting that from your taxes in the current year. So it creates the amount of taxes that you're going to pay a lot less. So that is something specific, very specific, that really every business owner should be taking advantage of if they're utilizing their business to save for retirement.
That's really good to know. I didn't even know that existed, and especially as a business is growing, it's like, oh, I'm able to write a lot off. I might not have a lot of taxes, and then like that first year that
Mm-hmm.
they really do well, and
Mm-hmm.
then they have to pay taxes, it hits them, and they're like, dang, that, that really stinks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's around the time that they should also be thinking about, you know, well, now I do have profit. What do I do? Or I do have money I can start saving up with, especially if you're an independent owner who doesn't have much of a staff. It might even just be you.
Mm-hmm.
Smaller companies, like that is your retirement that you're,
Mm-hmm.
you're talking about starting to do. So,
Yeah. And
um,
to put really specific numbers on it, and why it's different than a traditional IRA, is a traditional IRA you can only contribute $6,000 to. So
mhm.
say you make $50,000 in a year. That's your income for the year. You have to pay taxes on $50,000. Um, you most likely not paid, unless you're filing quarterly. You most likely haven't paid the FICA taxes and everything. So there's going to be a lot more taxes than your typical salary employee who's been getting withholdings on their paycheck.
Mhm.
So what you can do is, if you made 50,000 in a year, instead of contributing a max of 6,000, a SEP IRA allows you to contribute 20% of your income into the account. So you can contribute 10,000, which makes the amount that you get taxed on, instead of it being 50,000, it'll be 40,000. So you
Hmm.
can save significantly more on taxes when you set up your retirement plan in that way.
Cool. Well, that's really good to know, and I really appreciate your time. I think we definitely went through a lot of different things in here, and I think businesses are really going to find this exciting. I mean, I know I do, and I really look forward to seeing you in the nightly networking group.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me, Bill.
No problem.